So let's talk about a world where the melting speed of a glacier can actually send shockwaves through the stock market. Seriously, this is a world where a company's carbon footprint can suddenly matter just as much as its quarterly earnings report. How on earth did we get here, and how is this completely rewriting the rules of investing? Now, you might think this is just some brain teaser, but no, this is happening right now. Take Brazil. A massive water crisis hits their hydropower, energy prices go through the roof, and bam! An aluminum company's earnings get wiped out by over $27 million. It's a perfect, brutal example of a climate event directly torpedoing a company's bottom line. Or, look at California. Wildfires, supercharged by climate change, created such insane liabilities that they literally bankrupted a huge utility, PG&E. These aren't just stories, they're data points proving a massive shift is underway. And this right here is the single most important thing to get. For the longest time, environmental issues were seen as, well, kind of soft concerns, right? Totally separate from the hard numbers of finance. That time is over. The former governor of the Bank of England had this amazing phrase for it. He called climate change the tragedy of the horizon. And what he meant was, the real danger is that by the time climate change becomes a full-blown, undeniable crisis for the markets, it's already too late to do anything about it. So it's a race against the clock, and you're seeing the entire financial world scrambling to get ahead. And that race, well, it starts at the very top. To deal with this new reality, policymakers and regulators all over the world are pushing for some really fundamental changes in how finance works. It really boils down to two big things: demanding radical transparency, and for the first time ever, putting a real price on pollution. It's that old saying, right? You can't manage what you can't measure. So the first absolutely critical step is forcing companies to be crystal clear and consistent about their environmental risks. And this is not about PR or some glossy green report. It's about giving investors the cold, hard data they need to make smart decisions. We're talking about a company's actual greenhouse gas emissions, how much water they're using in places that are running dry, or how exposed their supply chain is to a hurricane. And that demand has led to some pretty powerful new rules. Now, what's so fascinating about the TCFD is who's behind it. This wasn't started by some environmental group. As you can see, it was launched by the G20's Financial Stability Board. These are the people who monitor risks to the entire global financial system. They looked at climate change and didn't just see an environmental issue, they saw a potential trigger for a systemic financial collapse. So they created the TCFD as the tool to make that risk visible to absolutely everyone. And this framework is brilliant, really. The best way to think about it is like a 4-part stress test for how ready a company is for climate change. It all starts at the top, with governance. It asks, is the board of directors even paying attention? Then it drills down into strategy, the what-if scenarios. From there, it gets super practical with risk management. Like, what are you actually doing about it? And then it all comes down to the fourth pillar, metrics and targets, where the company has to show its work. Show us the numbers. This 4-part structure gives investors a consistent blueprint, so you can compare any two companies and see who's really prepared and who's just talking a good game. Okay, so disclosure is a huge step forward. Getting companies to tell the truth is great, but, it's still just disclosure. Information by itself doesn't guarantee action. So how do you get a company to go from just reporting a risk to actually reducing it? Well, you have to give that risk a price tag. So yeah, how do we get from just talking about risks to actually doing something? The answer is simple. It's powerful and it's pure economics. You make pollution pay. The logic here is just incredibly straightforward. It's called the polluter pays principle. I mean, for decades, it was like a factory could just dump its waste into a river for free, while everyone downstream paid the price with bad health and a trashed environment. This principle is basically like sending that factory a bill for the cleanup. It forces the cost of that pollution right back onto the company's balance sheet, and that creates a really powerful direct incentive to pollute less. And there are two main ways governments are doing this. On the one hand, you've got an emissions trading system, or ETS. Here, the government sets a hard limit, a cap, on total pollution. Think of it like a quota system. Companies that get innovative and come in under their quota can sell their extra allowances to companies that go over. On the other hand, you have a carbon tax, which is way more direct. It's basically a tariff on pollution. For every ton of carbon you emit, you pay a set price. For a business, the key difference is that with an ETS, the cost to pollute can fluctuate, but with a tax, that cost is fixed and predictable. Okay, so we've got global disclosure rules making risks visible.
And we've got economic penalties making them costly. But how does this all come together for you, the investor, looking at one specific company? Well, it all boils down to one critical, kind of jargony concept.
And that concept is materiality. In finance, a material issue is anything that could realistically move the needle on a company's profits. But the most important thing to see here is that materiality is dynamic. It's always shifting. 10 years ago, the big material risks for a car company were things like oil prices or union disputes. Today, the number one material issue is how fast they can switch to electric vehicles. A company that gets that timing wrong is facing a massive, maybe even existential financial risk. Let me show you what I mean. Think about the images you've seen everywhere in the last few years. That heartbreaking photo of a tiny seahorse clinging to a cotton swab, or those huge swirls of plastic garbage in the ocean. This created a massive wave of public feeling that went from just quiet concern to global outrage. And that outrage started to change how people shop. And suddenly, that outrage became material. Oil giant BP, which makes a ton of money from the raw materials for plastic, had to officially warn its own investors that this growing plastic aversion could have a material impact on its future oil demand. At the exact same time, PepsiCo read the room and responded by completely overhauling its entire packaging strategy. This is materiality in action, perfectly. A shift in public values became a direct financial threat for one company and a strategic emergency for another. It's the bridge that connects a news headline directly to a company's balance sheet. So when you put this all together, what does it really mean? We've basically just walked through the modern investor's toolkit for navigating this new, complicated world where the environment and finance are completely tangled up together. So let's just recap the three key takeaways. First, you've got global frameworks like the TCFD that are creating a whole new era of mandatory transparency. It's getting a lot harder for companies to hide their risks. Second, carbon pricing is turning pollution from some abstract problem for society into a very real, concrete cost for businesses. And third, materiality. That's the crucial link that connects it all, turning these big environmental trends into specific, measurable impacts on a company's stock price. And all this leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. These tools we've talked about, transparency, pricing, materiality, they are incredibly powerful for making risk visible and helping investors manage it. But is the end goal here to actually solve the underlying environmental problems, or is it just to help Wall Street get better at dodging the consequences? The answer to that question is probably going to define the next decade of both finance and climate action.